I think we'll probably get started if everyone wants to take their seats. Hi, my name
Stance.
is Anna Kujevnikov. I'm the community development.
Wait, can you say that one more time?
My name is Anna Kujevnikov. I'm the community development manager here at Acadiana Center for the Arts. One of my roles is to curate professional development opportunities for the artists and creatives in Acadiana, which is why Rita's here, because I know that we have a lot of talented musicians here, and we just wanted to make sure that everybody understood the processes that you have to take for Grammy nomination, because it's not just submitting one song, it's about, there's a whole membership application period. So I'm gonna leave it to Reed. Thank you so much for coming out here.
Sure.
Today, and yeah, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Well, as Anna said, my name is Reed Wick. I am the Associate Director for Membership and Industry Relations for the Recording Academy, which is, we're best known for the Grammy Awards. And before I go too much further, I would just want to introduce one of my board members and my former chapter president, Sean Ardouin from Lake Charles. He drove over, so I may call on Sean to give a little color as the football analysts do, you know. But it's good to see some new members and some longtime members and also a bunch of new faces, which is good. I like to say that you know, we're best known for the Grammy Awards, but the Grammy Awards is way more than the TV show that you see on CBS. The Grammy Awards TV show is a property of CBS that they license with us to be able to do a big music spectacle. If you've seen the Grammy Awards, you notice that we only give out about a dozen awards on the TV show, and it's really all about the performances and stuff like that. But the Grammy Awards itself covers, I don't know, how many categories do we have this year?
70-something?
No, we're up to like 90 different categories, every genre of music, all different aspects. Some are for albums. We're going to get into some of this. Some are for individual songs, some are for the songwriters, some are for producers, all the different craft, all the different aspects of making records. But what I also like to say is that the Recording Academy is way more than just the Grammy Awards. In fact, to me, while I love celebrating amazing music that's created, and we have been blessed with, Louisiana has been blessed with boatloads of great musicians over the years from all across the state, every corner of the state. And it's been reflected in the many Grammy nominations and wins that we've had over the years. In fact, a couple of little known facts that I'll give you before we get started is that the Grammy Awards were named by a 16-year-old girl who lived in New Orleans back in 1956. The Oscars are actually 20 years older than the Grammys. And when the Recording Academy, the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, first got together in Los Angeles, they were like, we need to come up with a name for our award similar to the Oscars for the Academy Awards, right? And so they put out a nationwide contest, and this girl, and her name was Dana was her name. And she liked loud music, and she had a gramophone, and she used to crank it up, and her mom would be like, turn down the Grammy. And so when this article came out, in the Times-Picayune in New Orleans, and I think it was in newspapers all over the country, her mom said, Jay, you ought to enter your name in. She goes, what are you talking about? She goes, your Grammy, you call that thing the Grammy. You should enter it in. And lo and behold, that's how the Grammy got its name. And she got like a stack of 78s. You know, anybody remember 78s? Some of y'all are too young. But that was her prize. But lo and behold, 67 years later, that's been the name of our award all these years. The other thing I'll tell you is that the very first year of the Grammys, they only had about 8 categories in that first year, and 2 of those were won by Louisianians. One was Van Cliburn, who was a classical pianist from Shreveport, Louisiana, and the other was, oh, I'm totally drawn blank, is sax player, excuse me, Healy Smith and, come on, somebody help me out.
And then B.
No. She was the sidekick to Sam Butera. No, come on. Why can't I think of his name?
Not there.
All right. I know. Real famous guy, played in Vegas forever. And I'm totally
Wayne?
drawing a blank. Who? No. I'm sorry. Louis Prima. Thank you. Did you look it up? You looked it up? Thank you. I gotta apologize. I just got back from London. I'm still on London time, so I'm in a little bit of a fog. But the Recording Academy is an organization for professionals in the music industry, and in the last 15 years, we've also added a student component of that. And several of the students that are at ULL, I guess it's just UL now, right? UL have been members over the years, students at Loyola and Tulane and other schools all across the country. But really, we're about serving our membership. We're about professional development, networking. We do a lot of work in the area of public policy, especially in Louisiana. We've been extremely active at the state level and have passed several laws in the last few years that are really beneficial to our industry. I'm going to cover some of that stuff a little bit later. I'm going to try and go through this quickly, and then if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to stop me, and I'll try my best to answer. But since this presentation was called "How do you win a Grammy?" There's no real answer to that. Ask Sean, how do you win a
No
Grammy?
real answer to that.
But there's some steps you could take to be part of the process, right? So we'll start there. This is our cool, I just found this out today. We have this new cool little interactive website, which I didn't notice before, but I'll roll through it. So what sets the Grammy apart from every other award, and I hope y'all don't mind if I sit down, is that we're the only peer award in the music industry, meaning that you have to be, oh, is that mess up the camera? Sorry. We're the only peer award that is voted on by people who are sort of vetted. You know, you're qualified to be a voting member in the Academy, and meaning that you have to be one of the people that participates in the process of making records as well. And we'll cover the different levels of membership as we go on, but that's what makes the Grammy different than the American Music Awards and everything else, is that those are voted on by fans, their popularity contests. We ask our voting members to vote on the absolute artistic integrity and the artistic quality of a recording, the songwriting, the recording process, the packaging, you know, the different categories have different criteria, but we ask people to vote for what they think is the best thing, not the most popular thing, not the best selling, not the best chart thing. And there's been plenty of examples, and I've been blessed to be in the space where things that you didn't expect to win because they weren't that popular won because artistically they were head and shoulders above something else. So I'll start there. Oops, my mouse died. So how it starts, I already went through that, peer award. It starts with the online entry process. And we're in the middle of that right now. And so for the 67th Grammys, which is what's coming up in February, it's for recordings that were released between September 16th of 2013 and August 30th. And so we call that the eligibility period. And the reason that it's out of whack like that is by the other stuff that you're going to see, because it's not really, we don't call it the 2025 Grammys. We call it by the number year because the eligibility period doesn't match up with the calendar year. So it's really about the recordings that were recorded with, that are released within that year period. Now, this 1 year, we switched things up a little bit. So there's a 15-day added period to this one that was taken off of last year. So I think next year it's going to be September 1 through August 30th. But this year we're in kind of like a leap year kind of vibe. But essentially, if recordings were released between that time period, and what we mean by released is they have to be available for sale or streaming on all the major services, whether it's Spotify or Apple Music, Amazon, whatever. If it's been released there, then that means it's been commercially released. We used to actually use that term commercially released, but I don't see it up there. So maybe they're not using it because I think it's confusing with streaming and stuff like that these days. I guess. This is the newest, the latest and greatest. So typically there's about 20,000 recordings that are entered into the Grammys every year. Just think about that. And that's probably only 1/5 of the amount of records that are released every year. But that's a lot. And the eligibility is what I was just talking about. The two main criteria for eligibility is that it has to be released within that period of time and that it has to be available for sale where somebody can either buy it or stream it. Sorry, getting old. And let's see, screening, genre screening. So what happens is that once recordings have been entered in through the online entry process, and I'll cover that a little bit more. Our awards department, we have managers for each of the different categories, and they go through and they look at every single recording that's been entered in. They match it up to see when it was released and that it is available for sale or streaming, as I mentioned. So that's what we call the eligibility screening. Now, for certain categories, we have what we call screening committees, because every single category, and I'll just preface this by saying I have some PDFs. If anybody wants, I'll be happy to email you. But every category has a description that describes what's the criteria for that category. So the screening committee's job is, in every chapter nominates people to be part of this 300 of experts, that they actually go through and make sure that the category that you entered your recording in matches the criteria of that category. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So sometimes things like folk and Americana might get mixed up a little bit, right? So you might think you're a folk artist, but according to the category descriptions, it actually matches this. Or even blues, like contemporary blues versus traditional blues, or country versus pop. We're seeing a lot of that, like songs you might think it's a country song, but actually by the criteria we put forth, it's actually a pop song. So their jobs aren't to vote on the quality or anything, it's just to make sure that it's in the proper category. Oh, so that, you have a question?
In the wrong category, do they move it or does it get kicked out?
Nothing ever gets kicked out unless it doesn't meet the eligibility. It will get moved into what they consider the proper category. And once those committees make those decisions, it's final. I've actually had a few over the years. I've been with them for 20 years now. And I've seen a couple of cases where I personally felt like they made the wrong decision and I went to bat for it. But once those committees decide, it's over. You might know more about that.
So there's a thing now called artist intent. I think that, I don't know if that's the actual term, but it's
let me see if that's in here,
yeah,
actually.
whenever you're doing your application, it's on the application. When you're doing your application, you can write what you're intending this project to be. And so they're gonna take that into consideration. So like, I intend this to be this kind of a project. And then that way they'll listen to that. But now I don't know if you said, I intend this to be a country thing, and it sounds like bluegrass, it sounds like rock and roll, like thrash metal. I think you're gonna have a problem. Artist intent will only go so far. I think it's whenever it's borderline. Because on the screening committees, what happens is we all get in the room and listen, and we're all experts in our individual fields. And if somebody was to come and they would say they're playing exotica music, but it sounds like conjunto, or it sounds like polka, then I'm in there going, no, that's not it. And then we go, okay, well, where does that go? And then we go, oh, well, that sounds like this. And then we send it to that category. And that category gets together, oh, this is their own, boom. And then that's where it lives. But you have the opportunity to pre-argue. Now, this is what I was intending.
Yeah, so that's new this year then. I did read that they were adding that in, but I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
Wow.
Honestly, I haven't looked at the app yet. I've been going.
Every year.
Yeah, so the beauty of the Grammy Awards process, it's good to insert that there, is that the Grammy Awards actually change every single year. And so as members of the Academy, you have the opportunity to work through our elected leadership structure, which I'll cover a little bit later. And as I mentioned, Sean is a governor of our regional chapter, but then each regional chapter has trustees that serve on the national board. And those trustees are tasked with every aspect of governing the Academy, including the Grammy Awards process. And we have what we call the Awards and Nominations Committee. And every single year they entertain ideas for changes that hopefully improve the awards process. Some years those changes can be drastic. There's been years where they've completely reorganized categories and everything. Some years they're very minute. In fact, this year, I think that's one of the only real changes that they had. They didn't add any categories. They may have tweaked some language in some of those categories, but they literally change a little bit every year, if not
Yeah, 'cause
more
we have-
drastically.
We competing against Conjunto as well now, right?
I think that's added into regional
Conjunto is
routes.
regional.
So,
So we got another one.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. So once recordings are entered in, there's a two-stage process of how the voting works. In the first round of voting, all of the voting members in the academy, I almost should have done this the other way around, huh? Talked about,
We're here now.
but the voting members in the academy, and we have about 13,000 across the country. Their job is to listen to all the recordings given in a given category, and because not everybody is an expert in every field or every genre, the voting members are limited to 3 different fields and 10 different categories within those 3 fields. And I will show you those fields. I don't think they're listed in this particular website. But their job is to some categories may have 1,000 entries entered in it. Some of the big pop categories might have 1,000. Some might have 50, right? But your job as a voting member in the first round of voting is to pick the top 5 that you think are worthy of a Grammy nomination and put, and all the voting's done online these days. So you put your 5 votes in, and then Deloitte and Touche is our accounting firm. They will tally up all the votes at the end of the first round of voting, and the top 5 vote getters, if that's the right word, in each category become the 5 Grammy nominees, right? And then the Grammy nominations are announced usually in November, and I got a slide in there that'll tell you the exact date. And then the second round of voting, which happens is once the nominees are announced, is that the voting members will get a second ballot, and they'll vote in the same process, except that this time, instead of voting for 5 of 50, they will vote for they'll vote for 1 of the 5. Now, we have seen over the years that there'll be a tie in a category. In fact, this past year, in the regional roots category, there was a tie, so we had 6 nominations instead of 5.
And they tied to win.
And what was even more impressive, crazy, is that we actually had a tie in the winners, and that has happened before in other categories, but this is the first time it's happened in regional roots. So we actually had 2 groups from Lafayette win Best Regional Roots this year. And so one of them was the Lost Bayou Ramblers with the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra, and the other was Buckwheat Zydeco Jr. and his group. Il Sol Petit. Yeah, I had trouble saying that at first. But there are some provisions that if a category doesn't, like the categories to stay viable have to have a minimum of 40 entries in a given year. And if a category has fewer than 40 in a given year, they only will announce, they'll only honor 3 nominees, or honor's the right word. They'll select 3 nominees for that year. And then the category sort of goes on probation. And then if they don't maintain 40 over the next couple of years, then they will actually eliminate the category and reassign where those particular things might go into other categories that make the most sense. And that will require and trigger the awards and nominations committee to actually go through the process. So we've seen that happen over the years too. So,
Category.
yeah. So I will tell you that on average, we've been right at the number, 40, 50. This past year, what's that?
It's Cajun, Zydeco,
Hawaiian, indigenous music, like brass bands from New Orleans, things like that.
Folk,
so 40
Go-go.
comes from all those genres.
Yeah. But that's who enters it in. You know, we can't make somebody, you know, just like you can bring a horse to water, you can't make them drink, right?
70-something interests, actually.
So this past year, we made a really big push into the indigenous music community. So like Ralph from the awards department went up to the Indigenous Music Summit in Canada, presented there. Then we hosted like a big international indigenous music outreach event, which I participated in. And they made some really good points. But in fact, their biggest point was the definition of regional roots is supposed to be you can identify the sound of this music by the region from which it comes. But the indigenous people said, hey, we're from everywhere. We got indigenous people in South Louisiana. We got indigenous people in Canada. We got indigenous peoples all over. And we don't all sound exactly the same. We all have our different styles. We all have our different inflections in the way and we have our different languages, you know? The case they made was we should have our own category, right? So, like we tell any genre, you got to get your numbers up. And so they actually put a big effort in and they got us up to over 75 in regional roots with the hope that they'll continue to grow that and break away and do their own category. But that also means that we got to build up what we do, which I think is why Conjunto is in there now.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, if we have any Cajun artists in here, I would just, be like, if you know anyone who've been doing albums and stuff like that, who don't submit, just try to encourage them to submit, because that's why we don't have it. And, everybody got, I guess, for whatever reason, they just didn't submit. Because we were putting the albums out, it was just like pulling teeth to get people to submit it. And and like you said, 33, you go below 30, you get on probation, and you do that.
No, 40.
Oh, it's 40. We were.
Well, the most we ever had, when we had the 4 years of the
Yeah,
Zydeco and Cajun music category, the most we ever had in that entire 4 years was 33 in any one given year. And we never got on probation because they didn't have that in place yet.
right. It's in place now.
But the year before that happened, the polka category is what started this all off, because polka had its own category. And the same guy won 17 years in a row. And that was the big wake-up call, that they were like, there's something wrong with the system when the same person wins year after year after year after year. And what was wrong with the system is they only had about a dozen polka entries in every year, but we didn't have any mechanisms in place to put it on probation or whatever. And that caused them to look at all the categories and come up with a better way of managing all the categories. And that's when we had the big restructuring several years ago. And that's how Regional Roots was a combination of 4 or 5 of the different categories that were, none of them were hitting 40 in any given year. And that's how Regional Roots came about. It got absorbed into Regional Roots.
There wasn't a probation system, so if we had hit below 33.
No, well, the threshold's always been 40. We just never ever made it to 40.
And then as a whole category, for years, we'd be in there, and like that process we just talked about, how if something doesn't fit, we send it out. Because people in New York was like, yeah, this is a second line song. And then we got to identify this is not. It's just a brass thing. Sorry, you got to go there. And when we start chipping away, now we got 33. And then we're making phone calls. We're like, hey, man, we got to make sure, because we don't want to go on probation. Hey, because then it goes from 5 nominations down to 3. If that happens 3 times, 2 or 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden we're all in Americana, or we're all in
Folk,
or
or
we're all in something, and there's 1,000 entries.
and you see over the years they've had, so like when Queen Ida won and Clifton Chenier and all of them, back then it was ethnic music category. So they've changed those over the years, and even when Beausoleil won the first time, it was like contemporary folk music.
Right.
So over the years, those categories have changed a bunch. I mean, if you look at the whole 66 years of the past, which I have, why, you've seen categories change, descriptions change, but with the time too. I mean, they used to call R&B race records, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so we've tried to change with the times and become in the 20th century, 21st century now. But the bottom line is that the process, the categories, all that stuff can be changed if our members get together and talk to their representatives. I mean, because it's kind of like the government. I mean, you go to your board members and you say, I think this is what's wrong, and then we work together with the awards department and write proposals. And I've seen a lot over the 20 years that I've been with them, and hopefully we move things in the right direction. And that also is true of other things too. I mean, because in the early days of downloads, it took them a couple of years to actually accept downloads, because it used to have to be that you had to be able to go to a record store and buy the record to be eligible. And over time, that changed, right? So we absolutely had to change the eligibility because no one goes to record stores anymore. I mean, you go down to Lanyap and buy some vinyl, right? But you don't, for the most part, go buy, the latest Beyonce CD there. Maybe some people do, maybe, I don't know.
Because it was national distribution.
Yeah,
You have
so
to have national
that is-
physical distribution.
that has changed, but that also has changed for the better for some international artists too, because it used to be that you had to have national physical distribution in the United States. So if you were from France and you wanted to put your record out, but it wasn't physically available to go into a record store and buy, you just weren't eligible. But now if you're on Spotify and you're streaming all over the world, now everything's eligible. And we've seen that with bands like Bad Bunny and others who are from other countries really rise up because they didn't have those restrictions of having to be a US artist or be based in the US or have distribution in the US. So, just it's a changing system and we have to be ready to roll with it. So, so it's not really a complicated process with the Grammys. It's a pretty straightforward process, but let me get out of this program here and show a couple of PowerPoint thing or a couple of slides. So give me 1 second here. So these are the important dates related to the Grammys. As I mentioned before, the eligibility period, March 1st is the membership deadline. I'll go over that in the next little section. For those who are members, voting members, their memberships have to be, well, voting and professional members, their memberships have to be active as of July 31st to be able to enter recordings in. So one of the things with regard to being able to enter records in, it happens in two different ways. One of which is any voting member or professional member can enter recordings in. But record labels, nowadays we call them media companies. Media companies can register with the Academy and they can enter recordings in as well. If you are a regular member and you also have a label, there's no need to register your label, just do it as a member. And I'll, as you see by this cost structure, as a member of the Academy, you get your first 5 entries for free, and then you have to pay per category once you get past that 5. With media companies, they have to pay for every single entry. And just to give you a little frame of reference, we still are even though we never used to charge at all several years ago, the Blues Music Awards, for instance, charges $250 to put every single entry in any category. And so we still are way below the market price, if you will. But one of the benefits of membership, of being a member, is that you get to enter your first 5 for free. And I will tell you that we do have sort of a hardship policy that if, you really can't afford, you wanted to enter in 70 categories, but you can't afford the extra 50, $60, whatever it is, you can call the awards department and they can actually add some extra entries to your profile. And for Louisiana, I basically can enter as many as I need to for people. So before the day is out, if you got a record that you have out that's eligible this year and you're not able to enter it yourself, please let me know because I will enter it for you because I want to make sure that all of my Louisiana peeps get entered in. And it's something I do every year. So the entry period, which is going on now, started July 17th and runs through August 30th. And then with regard to the voting process, if you're a voting member, you have to have an active membership as of September 15th to be able to vote in the first round. First round runs from October 4th through October 15th. We used to have like a month-long runway, maybe more, 6 weeks of voting. And it's because, you used to have to like physically go hunt down music to find it, go listen to a CD or an album or whatever. And, a lot of our artists that are members, voting members, are on tour. And so they needed more time. But in the surveys that we've done, and this is not only applicable to the Grammy Awards voting process, but we've learned this through voting for board members, and I belong to other membership organizations and I'm on boards of other organizations. What we've learned is people vote on the first day and they vote on the last day. And the only reason they vote on the last day is because you sent them a reminder that today's the deadline and you better vote if you want to get your vote to count, right? So, and one of the other improvements to the Grammy Awards process that we've made is that now when you make your entry online, you actually provide us the links to Spotify and Amazon or whoever. And that way, when the voting member goes to the ballot, the links are right there. And so if you're on a plane and you're flying to your next gig, or if you're in Europe and you're, on the bus going from show to show, whatever that is, you now could do all the voting in one little spot, and you don't need to be sitting in front of your record player or your CD player or whatever. And so what we did was we actually condensed the voting period on both the first round and the second round. So then for the second round of voting, or the final round, as we call it, you have to be an active member as of November 1st. November 8th is the year that we're actually going to make the big announcements of who the Grammy nominees are that year. And just so you know, the Grammy Awards show, the actual TV show, is built on who the nominees are. So they don't even actually start planning the actual who's going to perform until they find out who the nominees are. So that's one of the cool things about the show as well. And then the actual Grammy Awards, once the votes are all tallied and the show happens, we find out who the winners are. Literally, we find out when they open the envelope. Deloitte does all the compilations and everything, and they literally deliver the day of the Grammys, because I work backstage at the Grammys. They literally come in with silver briefcases that have all the envelopes in them. And so that's how that works. So that's the basics of the timelines. This other slide. Oops, sorry. That's not what I wanted. Nope, this is what I want. So this just gives you a look at all the different categories. So what you'll notice is the ones with A, or for, in parentheses at the end, that's for a full album. The ones with S or T or both are for individual tracks or singles. So it could be an individual track from an album or a single if it's released as a single. And V obviously is videos, because we do have the video categories for, where is it? I know it's up there somewhere.
Production. Is it, no, not production.
Where's the video? Oh, they moved them. They used to be the last two categories.
Yeah.
That's another change. They made that change last year, I remember. So as you can see, so when I talked about we call it the 10-3 rule. So when you're looking at all the genres, each of the fields, you can pick 3 fields that you vote in, and you can pick 10 categories from within those 3 fields. But every voting member can vote in the 6 categories in the general field, because those are open to every single genre of music. So essentially you get to vote in 16 categories if you're a voting member, right? So what I tell people is, up until a few years ago, I was a voting member for 25 years. And then 5 years ago, one of the Grammy rule changes is that employees can no longer vote in the Grammys. So I no longer vote. But from the years that I owned the record label, and I'm still been an active musician all my life, I was a voting member for a long time. But, we ask our members to vote in their areas of expertise. So for instance, I'll listen to classical music every now and then, but I can't tell you, like the Firebird Suite recording that I have at home that I've been listening to all these years, I don't know who's making the new classical records today. So it's not an area that I have expertise. So I'm not going to say waste my vote. I would not put my vote in a spot, in a category or an area or a field that I don't have expertise. But the music I really know is the roots music stuff. Studied jazz in college and played jazz for years. So the jazz stuff, some of the rock stuff I know, but I'm not an expert in Latin music, or I'm not an expert in I wouldn't say I'm an expert in pop music at all or anything. So I would reserve my votes for the categories where I feel like I have the most expertise. And that way, the hope is that you really are having your peers vote on the work that you do. So if you're making gospel records day in and day out, the hope is that you'll vote in the gospel categories, because that's where you really know that music better than anybody else, or you're a true expert in the field. So 94 categories.
That's amazing.
We were up to 112 at one point, and then they cut it down to like 83 or 84, and then we've added some back over the years and some new ones. Question?
Always wondered, what's the record of the year song?
Great question.
The definition.
Like, what's the difference?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that because that's going to explain a lot of things. Okay, so let's look, record of the year, song of the year. Let's look at rock metal. See rock performance, rock song? Let's look at R&B. You see R&B song, R&B performance? So the song categories that have song in it are awards for the songwriter. Yeah, or writers. So if you and these two people co-wrote that best R&B song and it won, the three of y'all would be the nominees or you'd be the winners, right? But this gentleman right here may be the one who actually recorded it. So in that particular case, the songwriters get the award, but not the person who wrote, not the person who performed it, unless they also co-wrote it, right? Performance or record of the year, which they call it record of the year, but it's really performance of the year, that goes to the performers on a given recording. What's that?
Performance of the song, they should-
Well, that's one of the ones that goes back to the very beginning, so they've never messed with that particular name. But really, if you look at all the other ones where they say performance, now the only one that's kind of strange is the Christian and contemporary, gospel and contemporary Christian. They've kept those as performance and song, and I've been questioning why that you do it for that category, not that field, but not all the other ones. But if you look at all the other categories that have performance and song, they're broken out by the songwriters and the performers. Does that make sense? Okay. And what's that?
Articles that didn't want to split that category. It's another Grammy.
Ah.
Let's set a Grammy.
So anyone that has an album, the album categories in every genre, I mean, every field has album categories, right? So what happens in those situations is that, and this is one of the weird Grammy rules, is that, so my band played this record and we got nominated. So me and my band are the nominees, but the producer and the engineers on that record aren't considered nominees. But February 2nd rolls around and they call my name and I'm the Grammy winner. But now the engineer and the producers are Grammy winners. It's another crazy Grammy rule. But the only time that an engineer or a producer is actually considered a nominee is if they're in these engineer and producer categories up there, field 10, right? Either classical or non-classical. So there's a whole bunch of crazy Grammy rules and it applies to different things. And those rules change from time to time too. So for many years, the mastering engineers on a recording weren't considered Grammy winners, even though the recording and the mixing engineers were. But several years ago, they added the mastering engineers in, and actually one of our guys who used to be on our board, Brad Blackwood up in Memphis, was the very first mastering engineer to ever win a Grammy, period, because there were no categories where mastering engineers won, even though they're just as important as the recording engineer and the mix engineer, right? So that's another example of how things change, hopefully for the better, but it's just that it's a weird process. And it's taken me years and years to be able to understand a lot of this.
But the cool piece is, the reason that I love being a part of this so much is that it's constantly changing because they're constantly striving to be the fairest, the best, the most inclusive, I'll say most inclusive, but the most accurate. So if it's not accurate and somebody goes, hey man, that's wrong. Now granted, before it would take years to fix it, but now if they know and you got enough people, that's why I was asking about people to submit, because just like you said, just like in politics, you have to have enough people to keep doing the same thing so you can justify to get what you want to do. But it's constantly changing, constantly for the best. Music.
Question, yep.
Yeah, like between 31 and 32, when there's vocal versus instrumental for jazz, for instance, if an album has a combination.
So in almost every case with an album, it depends on what 51% or more of that album has. So if 49% of the album has vocals and 51 doesn't, then it's considered instrumental. And that's the case in anything where there's sort of a mixture. So say melodic rap performance and rap performance. So with this category, and I don't have these memorized verbatim, but essentially melodic rap performance is a combination of rapping and singing. Whereas the rap is just, although that's for an individual song, so that's not the best example. Let me find another couple of album examples. Yeah.
I was Regional Roots, best album.
Well, yeah, so with regional roots, so you have some albums that in regional roots that there's a combination of, well, that's not really true because,
No, yeah, because if it's 50% Zydeco and the rest of it's blues and whatever,
oh, yeah, it would be in Zydeco, yeah.
then it doesn't. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's African. Yeah, I got like rock and roll covers, and I got four, it's eight songs, and 3 of them are Cajun, and the other 5 is my version of, but it's not, it don't sound too Cajun, and it just kind of sounds maybe kind of, but it's going to Americana, or it's going to wherever those songs are.
Yeah.
50%.
So it's all about 51%. So, and that's the same too with the engineering and producing. So, I mean, you've seen some of these pop records where there's 800 songwriters on a song. The hell's that all about? Or there's 10 producers. So for an album category, if there are 3 producers listed on there, they have to work with the artist to determine who is the one, or if it's all 3 worked on 51%, that's fine. But if one worked on 51% and the other 2 worked on, the remainders, then only the one who worked on the 51% would be considered the Grammy winner, right? So, and that's the case that's basically the rule, how they go about adjudicating which is which across the board in any of those situations where it's question mark. Does that make sense? I wanted to point out a couple other things that are kind of interesting. And that's what we call the craft categories. And those are field 9 and field 10. So what's different about these categories is that the only people that vote in those categories are the people who actually do that as their career. Meaning that only recording engineers can actually vote in those categories. And they don't vote in the general public in the first, and well, that's a little weird though, because there are a couple of them where the first round is voted by the craft and the final round is voted by the entire academy. Where is that
Okay,
listed?
so the immersive, I think.
There's a couple of them that are only done by the craft people. I think immersive's one. I think
Everything is packaged.
everything in this one is only done by the committees. So in order to vote in like the recording package, you have to be a graphic designer or a photographer or someone who contributes to that. Same with album notes writer. You have to be somebody who writes album notes, to actually to vote in those categories. Historical and box set, you have to be like a producer that produces these historical compilations and stuff. And believe it or not, there's a ton of them out there. Engineering, arranging, instrumental composition. I think in those cases, most of them, it is voted on in the first round by the committees, and then it goes to the full membership to vote in the final round. So there's just a few little quirky things that happen in some of the categories. And then the 2 video categories, they usually, I think in those cases, the first round is done by a committee and the second round is done by the full membership, but I might be wrong. I think they changed that recently. Any other?
It won't open up to you.
Yeah.
You don't qualify.
Any other questions?
I know that Terrence Simeon and his daughter put together some music for Disney with one of their rides. Would that fit into children's or anything?
Unless they put it out for sale. It's not out for sale or streaming. Yeah, because PJ Morton and Terrence Blanchard worked on that as well. They all worked on it. He's on it too. Yeah, it's a whole bunch of Louisiana folks are on that ride Tiana's Last Stand or
I don't know. I wasn't on the 30 that got to go.
But if they release the recordings of it, it would be eligible. But I don't think those have been released.
They have a ride thing that's on Spotify, but I don't think it's the ones that are on the record.
Okay.
'Cause I was like,
Yeah.
I was excited.
Yes, Rob?
So Reed, if I had original material.
Oh.
I had never produced it before or then recorded. would my track to the Grammys be better if I went to a producer like, or a recording person like Tony Daigle and have him record it and then let him submit it to the Grammys?
Well, so let me tell you about a couple of the other little stipulations, and these aren't as spelled out in the eligibility stuff, but for all the categories except for historical and box set, I think, they have to be released within that eligibility period. But the recording process can only go back 5 years. So it's not everybody makes a recording in 3 weeks. A lot of artists start 4 years ago, working on it here, work on it there, work on it there, and it takes them 4 years to put it out, right? But that window of time only goes back 5 years. So when you enter your recordings in, it asks you, when is the recording periods? You know, because we have seen people add to recordings that were recorded 20 years ago and then they never got released. But they added 5 new songs, but 7 songs were recorded. So now your 51% kicks in, right? Or that the entire project over the life of it goes beyond the 5 years. So that's one of the stipulations in the eligibility, is when was it actually recorded? But if you take, and I mean, Taylor Swift did her whole catalog, right? If you take songs that were written and even, you know, I mean, because we see it all the time when somebody covers a new song that was written 40 years ago, but they do a new version of the recording, it's about the recording itself. So the song could have been written whenever, but if the recording of that song happened within the last 5 years. Now, what will not be eligible is for these song categories. These song categories are only for songs that are newly released this eligibility period. So say I took this R&B song, well, it wouldn't be eligible. I mean, because it would be eligible if I took a song that Stevie Wonder wrote 40 years ago and I recorded a new version of it. And it could be eligible for the performance of the song because that's a new recording, that's the performance. But the songwriting category, Stevie wouldn't be eligible again as the songwriter because he was only eligible in the year that that song was written in 1973. Does that make sense? So having Tony or whoever re-record songs that you wrote 30 years ago or whatever it is, that would count as the performance, the recording of it, the new recording.
Even though they released
That I'd have to get a better answer on. I'll be honest. That would be going,
the new, suppose I write something new. I've never released anything before. What's my best step to the Grammy? Go to a studio and have them record it.
yeah, so, you know, people ask me that all the time. What I say is, you know, make the best possible record you can make. Those 20,000 albums that are entered in every year, there's a lot of crap, but there's a lot of really, really good stuff. And I always truly believe that the cream rises to the top. And if you make a great record and people like it and listen to it, you know, I also get asked all the time, how do I even get people to know that my song's been entered into the Grammys? I'm like, well, how do you get people to know that they want to buy your song or listen to it? You know, it's the same process. In fact, I would argue that as musicians and voting members, we probably are more passionate about listening to music than the average listener, right? Like I seek out new music every single day. I look for new stuff all the time. Okay, so I would say that the same way you promote your record to be able to have people want to listen to it is the same way that you are promoted to people who you want to vote for it, right? There are voting campaign things, and we can go over some of that, but you had a question back here?
So do streams matter?
No. You mean amounts of streams? As a voting member, you are asked to vote on the artistic merit of that particular recording. If it's got 10 streams or 10 million streams. If it's a great record and I found it and I want to vote on it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I was in the room in both of these cases. a young lady at the time, she's a little older now, Esperanza Spalding, was up for Best New Artist. And she was up against Drake and Kanye West, right? Was it Kanye? No, Drake and Justin Bieber were the two artists, two of the 5 artists that were nominated for Best New Artist. And he's now retired, but a friend of mine, Lee Mergner, used to be the editor of Jazz Times Magazine. And he called me up. He's like, dude, I know how you voting member guys work. I bet you Esperanza is going to win Best New Artist. I said, dude, I hope so. Because I couldn't give a shit about Drake or, sorry, I couldn't give a shit about Drake or Justin Bieber. And honestly, and I'm wrong, 5 years from now, nobody's going to know who those guys are. I'm wrong. But Esperanza Spalding, if anybody knows of her at all, she is the most amazing musician I've ever heard. She is phenomenal. And she's coming to St. Louis while we're there. Yeah, can't wait to see her again. She won the Best New Artist category. And if you remember, Justin Bieber's manager, Scooter Braun, was so pissed off that he took out a full-page ad in Billboard that the Grammys sucked because we didn't give his artist who had 8 million followers. But musicianship, there's no comparison. I mean, he's just a freaking pop star.
Give him a bass, give him a guitar, give him a piano. Say
Yeah, she'll eat his ass every day. Can I say that on my recording here, Anna? So fast forward a couple of years. Our friend Herbie Hancock put out a record of Joni Mitchell songs called the Joni Letters. And that, I didn't even know this album was out. I was voting and I'm like, wow, I'm a huge Joni Mitchell fan and I'm a huge Herbie Hancock fan. Let me hear what this sounds like. So I listened to it, immediately hit buy on Apple iTunes, whatever it was back then, and was like, I'm voting for this. So I voted for it. Ironically, of all this stuff, at my alma mater in New Orleans, Loyola, we were in the process of courting the Thelonious Monk Institute to move to New Orleans. And Herbie is the chair of their board. So I literally met Herbie a month earlier at Loyola, went to dinner with him and all their board. And I'm asking him about this record. And I said, dude, I voted for you. It's just amazing. He goes, yeah, it's just such a pleasure to make that, you know, her music's so great, great arrangements. Tina Turner's on it. I mean, all these, Corinne Bailey Rae's on it, all these amazing artists. I'm like, dude, I just hope it wins. But he's up against Kanye. That was the one. Kanye's mom just died. That was the year Kanye said, I own the Grammys. I'm like, man, he don't own the Grammys. He's an asshole. If you don't know, I've met him. He's an asshole. But I'm just being honest, right? You probably agree with me. But earlier that evening, Herbie wins for Best Jazz Album. And I'm working that particular year, I was working in what we call Photo Deadline, which is in the media center. So when you see all those crazy pictures of him holding the Grammy all funky and stuff, that's where it's like controlled paparazzi. So the New York Times and the, Rolling Stone and Billboard magazine, all the photographers are in there. And my job is when the winners come in, I take like a grease board and say, Herbie Hancock, Best Jazz Album. I hold it up so they can take the picture so they know who it is. And then I bring Herbie in and give him one of the Grammys to hold, right? And I'm just watching, and literally I just met Herbie, so we kind of rekindled the little friendship. So he walks in and they're all like, oh, yeah, Herbie, hand it, do this and act like you're drinking out of it, all this stuff and crazy stuff. And at one point, Herbie took it out of his right hand and he put it in his left hand. And one of the photographers yelled out, what you doing that for? He goes, because I'm saving this one for the one I'm going to win later tonight. And you're like, there's no way you're going to beat Kanye. Kanye owns the Grammys, all this stuff. I'm like, what assholes? This is Herbie Hancock. I mean, if anybody deserves the adulation of the entire music industry, it's Herbie Hancock. So he ushers out. So later that night, end of the night, album of the year, I had a monitor about that big in my room to see. But I can hear all the noise outside because I'm backstage. And I see they announce it and it's Herbie Hancock wins. And I'm like, yes, I can't believe it. Herbie won album of the year. So he comes rolling through and here comes Herbie this time. And this time I hand him 2 Grammys and he's taking the pictures and they're sitting there bitching at him because he beat out Kanye. And I mean, they were assholes to Herbie Hancock. And I literally wanted to go out there and like kick some butt. But luckily at the time, the president of the Grammys came in, he comes in last. And they were like asking him, how can you give that Grammy to Herbie when he probably only sold 20,000 records and Kanye sold 20 million? And he goes, and Neil Portnow, our former president, said, well, you obviously don't understand how the Grammys work. We vote on artistic merit. And our members thought that this record was the highest artistic achievement of the year. So you can go take all your charts and all your followers and all that stuff and shove it up your butt because we voted for this and this is what won. And I was like, so proud. The reason I was even more proud is that I realized that the last time a jazz album won Album of the Year was the year before I was born in 1962 for Gilberto Gao and Stan Getz for A Girl from Ipanema is the last time a jazz record won for Album of the Year. And so every now and then we get it right. There's been times when we've got it really wrong. But the beauty of it, going back to why we make changes every year, is we want to get it right every year. And so, you know, it's not super complicated. It's a matter of putting it in, putting your record in. You got to be in it to win it kind of thing, right? And like I said at the beginning, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of our artists from Louisiana get nominated and win. He's been nominated 4 times now. You know, we got plenty of people from this community who are winners and even more that are nominees. And I'm really proud to be a Louisianan. How do I say that?
Louisiana.
A Louisianian. I mean, I'm born and raised here. I should know how to say it.
Yeah, you from New Orleans.
I'm from New Orleans, a little different. Yeah. Let's see here. I was going to do a quick little overview of membership, if anybody's interested in that. Oh, it works. So, as I mentioned, we don't really call it a trade association, but I guess that's the closest analogy. So just like the Motion Picture Academy is the Academy Awards that they give out for the movies, and the Television Academy is the Emmys, we're the same. We're the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. Back in the day, the old timers always used to call us NARAS because that's our acronym. A number of years ago, we stopped using all of that. We just call it the Recording Academy. Of course, people come up to me, well, so do you teach? Is it a recording school? You know, so there's no winning, right? But we are a membership organization for professionals in the music industry. There's 2 types of members for professional members. One is the voting, one is the professional. The main difference, and I'll go over that. And then the third one is the student membership. And as I mentioned earlier, just this past year, we started a non-student aspect of that. And I think we're going to be rebranding that as Grammy Next Gen. It just hasn't been official yet. That's what I read yesterday when I got home from vacation. So for voting members, these are people who are part of the creative process of making the records. It's the songwriters, it's the performers, it's the recording engineers, the producers, the people who write the liner notes, the people who produce the videos, who do the graphic design. They can all qualify as voting members, right? The professional members are more of the people who are on the industry side of things. They're the different music executives, either, as you can see, creative representatives, managers, lawyers, educators, all that stuff. Really, the only difference between these 2 membership classes is that the voting members vote in the Grammys. Professional members can make entries. They just can't vote because that would negate it being a peer award. So it's really all about, the voting is about people who make records vote on those records. So that's the main difference between the 2. So about 6 years ago, we changed the way that we bring new members in. It used to be that you could join throughout the year. And it also used to be that we had a staff of 5 people in LA that made decisions on who gets in and who doesn't. Our board of trustees, just like I mentioned, vote on changes to the Grammy Awards. They also vote on the membership process. They voted 6 years ago to change it to where they, as the peers of the people applying, are the ones who either let people in or not, right? Or I should say, offer invitations to join. And so the way it works is through this, what we call now peer recommendation and invitation process. So the way it works is, and it's listed as 2 letters of recommendation. It's not really letters. You go to our website, there's a little form you fill out. So either for someone who wants to join, either as a professional or a voting member, the process starts by going to essentially recordingacademy.com/join. And you get two different people to recommend you. They can either be a current member of the Academy, or they can be someone who's not a member of the Academy that works with you in some professional capacity. So it could be a bandmate, it could be your manager, it could be a songwriter that you co-write with, could be a producer who doesn't happen to be a member of the Academy, but they produce your records, whatever that looks like, right? So once you get your two recommendations, our system automatically emails you a link to log into our system and complete your application. The applications that includes things like your career, we call it career substantiation, but you know, they want to see what kind of press do you have, what's your social media presence. Essentially what they want to see is that you're pursuing music as your primary career. That's what they're looking for. And that entire submission process or application process needs to be completed by March 1st every year. And as I mentioned, they call it the peer review panel. Actually, it's a subset, or it's actually the membership committee of the Board of Trustees. We have set up a portal system, and they literally go in and log in and they review the 3,700 applications we had this year. And I think like 2,600 people got invited to join. And as it says, once the peer review panel goes through it all, they send out invitations for people to join. Yeah, so that might be in the next slide. No, it's not. So for a voting member, you have to prove that you have what we would call it recording credits, that you have credits on recordings, and you have to have a minimum of 12 different tracks that have been released. Back in the day, it used to be 6 tracks on commercially released recordings that were available in a record store, like physical recordings. We did away with that. Now it's 12 tracks that have been released over streaming. Now that can be 12 tracks that are on one record. It could be 12 tracks, 6 on on an album or an EP and 6 individual. Could be 10 tracks on your record and 2 tracks on somebody else's record. But the caveat is it needs to be, if you're being qualified as a songwriter, then you have to have 12 songwriting credits. If it's as a vocalist, then 12 vocalists. As a producer, 12 as a producer. Now you can qualify for multiple of those, and many people do, but you have to have at least 12 in one of those different artistic categories, if you call it, to qualify as a voting member. And then the rest of the stuff is they want to see, do you have a web presence? Do you have social media? Does your albums get reviewed? Are you touring or playing gigs? Those are the kind of career substantiation things. The peer review panel wants to see that you're actually pursuing a career in music. Now, that keeps it part of the peer aspect of things, right? So this is the basic deadlines of things. March 1st, the materials are due. They review things in April and May. Usually by the end of June, they send out the invitations for people to join. You need to accept your membership by July 31st to be able to participate in the OEP, is the online entry process. And then September 15th to actually participate in the voting process if you're a voting member. Something new we started just last year is a process called New Member Welcome Week, which actually is next week for all the new members. Which, Nancy, you should probably get an invite to that since Nancy's one of our newest members. And we started this last year, and it kind of goes with the theme of bringing everybody in as an annual class, because what we found in the prior years to making that change is that people would join at different times of year, and they never would really get onboarded properly. They wouldn't understand the rewards process. They didn't understand how Music Cares work. They didn't understand the different aspects of the organization. And so as we started bringing people in as an annual class, we're able to like bring them together, but also to get to meet each other and they get to meet our boards and stuff like that. So this is the second year that we're actually doing it where it's the whole country together. We would start, prior to COVID, we do it in a local basis. COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of people, right? So we started doing all this online, and it just seems to work much better that we can actually attract the entire country in this one week. And so the week is full of, for new members, it's full of different events that are all online that you can attend. It starts with a welcome event with our CEO. Then throughout the week, there are different like virtual mixers. So like next Thursday, I'm co-hosting one of them with new members, and it'll be people from all over the country. We're doing some at midnight for the midnight hours. We're doing some at 8 in the morning for the early risers. We're doing some in the middle of the day. I'm doing one at 5:30 in the afternoon. So I'm the early evening cats, I guess. But you also get to learn about all the different aspects of the academy. So we have these two different wings that are really geared towards programming for songwriters and composers, and we have one for producers and engineers. You get to learn about what Music Cares does, and I'll have a slide for Music Cares a little bit. This is something brand new. Now, we used to have a DEI committee, but we rebranded it as this diversity reimagined by engaging all music networks, music makers. And so it's all about DEI kinds of things, and we've set up several subgroups, reaching out to the Latin music community, reaching out to women in music, reaching out to disabled and accessibility, things like that. We have a workshop that goes through the whole online entry process that takes you through a step-by-step process. And then, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, I'm real involved with advocacy and stuff. So we do stuff at the federal level as well as the state level and sometimes local level. So at the federal level, we do 2 big events a year. We do one in the spring called Grammys on the Hill, where a bunch of our members go to Washington, D.C. and actually meet with members of Congress in D.C. And Sean has done that and brought his accordion and killed it up there. But we also do it locally, where we meet with our state reps when they're home in their districts. That has been rebranded again. It's had 3 different names. Last year it was District Advocate. This year, I found out yesterday, it is now called Music Advocacy Day. Go figure. So hopefully that's the last time they don't change that name anymore. But speaking of the advocacy, we have been doing a Louisiana Music Advocacy Day for like 6 or 7 years now, where we get our members from Louisiana all come to Baton Rouge. They declare it Music Advocacy Day in the state House and the Senate. We usually have somebody sing the national anthem. He did it last year. This year we had, who did it this year? You weren't there this year. Cupid did it this year. Killed it. We've had PJ Morton, Tank from Tank and the Bangers, Kiana Linnell. Who else? We've had somebody else too, I can't remember. But yeah, so some years we're not able to get a national anthem singer, but it's a way for us to like let the legislature know that, hey, we're here. We're important to Louisiana. We are a huge economic driver of the state, and you need to take us seriously. And it's been working. It's really been working big time. So new member welcome week. As a member of the Academy, these are just some of the ways that you can be involved. I won't really name these. So we have the country divided into 12 chapters. Some of them are very city-centric, Nashville, LA, New York, but they all have regional territories that they cover. So ours is based out of Memphis. Our chapter is 51 years old this year. So the Memphis chapter used to belong to a Nashville chapter, which used to incorporate Nashville, Atlanta, and Florida. But we broke our way 51 years ago. It was in the heyday of Elvis and Stax and Sun and all that stuff, right? So the founder of our chapter was Sam Phillips' son, Knox Phillips. And Knox made the case that not only Memphis, but our entire region deserves its own chapter. But in order to really make a significant break, they had to incorporate our whole region. So we cover essentially from Louisiana up to Missouri, up and down to Mississippi. We really are the most historically significant chapter in the country. I mean, American music came from our region, right? And we've influenced the entire world, and not only just the entire country, the music of our region. And so I'm really proud that this is our chapter. And of course, we call ourselves the coolest chapter, and most of the chapters around the country are envious of us because we literally have been the most innovative chapter of all of them for years. In fact, we're the most diverse in so many ways, including our board, which I'll show you. So this is our current board this year. And as you can see, we have representation from all over our 5-state region. The one area we don't have anybody this year is from Lafayette, but we need to get some Lafayette in here. But we've had several over the years. In fact, our very first ever national trustee from Louisiana was Cynthia Simeon. But Cynthia, Terrence, who else from Lafayette's been board members over the years? Joelle Savoy. I'm drawing blanks. Yeah. But our St. Louis area has grown tremendously. We've almost like quadrupled our membership in the St. Louis area. Now we have 4 board members from St. Louis, including our chapter president, which that was Sean last year, or last term, 2 years ago, yeah.
It was last year, but we're.
Yeah.
We're 2 terms away.
So it's a great board. It represents every genre, every region. It's really cool. We have a really cool board. So I mentioned Music Cares earlier. We have 2 foundations that are sister foundations of the Academy. This one is so near and dear to my heart. Music Cares and the original Grammy Foundation were both founded in 1989. The Grammy Foundation's mission was really music education oriented. Since then, we opened the Grammy Museum in downtown LA 15 years ago. They've now combined that foundation into the Grammy Museum. I mean, Grammy Foundation and Grammy Museum are now one foundation, still with a archiving, preservation, and education mission. Music Cares is our other foundation. That's a health and human services foundation. We've often referred to it as a safety net for the music community in their time of need. As you can see, we help with financial crisis, medical issues, addiction recovery. But really what changed Music Cares tremendously was when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans and the whole Gulf Coast. Literally, it was the first time that an entire American music scene got wiped out at one time. And with a lead gift from the Recording Academy, Music Cares started with $1 million and then raised $4 million to help just the Gulf Coast come back to life. And I was asked to run that program for those 2 years after Hurricane Katrina. And I literally gave away the $4 million and that included, you know, sending prepaid credit cards to people in Peoria, Illinois, because they couldn't afford the hotel that they were in and they couldn't get back to New Orleans. Or it was helping people buy, you know, literally, I'll never forget, I got rescued from a hospital in New Orleans where my wife was, and I was there with her. My wife's a nurse. And we got rescued and made our way to Memphis. And my second day, I got a call from the president of Summer Saxophones. And he said, look, I got horn players from New Orleans all over the country calling me about horns. I can't give them away for free. But if you can come up with a program, I'll give them to you at cost to give away. So we worked out a deal with Gibson Guitar, with Guitar Center, Musician's Friend, with FedEx based in Memphis. And we literally started issuing credits and we gave away that $4 million. It took almost 2 years or about 1.5 years to give it all away. But we bought new instruments for people. We helped them move back home. We paid for their groceries in whatever town they were in, hotel rooms. And I gotta say, it was the most, moving, gratifying. It made me realize that this organization really does care about the music communities that we serve. I mean, in a whole new way. And if anything else in my life, being able to help the music community of the Gulf Coast recover is just amazing. I mean, it's just unreal. We created a fast response system that was then used in the Hurricane Sandy in New York City. It was used in the Nashville floods. It was used in the floods in Colorado. It's been used in the fires in California. Then all of a sudden in 2020, this thing COVID comes along, right? And not only is it just one music community, whether it's in Louisiana or Colorado, whatever, it's the entire country is put out of work. We raised about $30 million and helped 30,000 plus musicians across the country with a $1,000 check here or $1,500 there, just to help them get through. And I mean, it's just crazy that people care about musicians. And, it was corporations, it was, literally when we were doing the Music Cares thing, I had, John Legend came and dropped off a check for 50 grand. Dave Matthews came and handed off a check for $100,000. So-and-so record label committed $100,000 or $750,000. There was a group of Japanese record labels that sent us a check for $250,000. I mean, that kind of stuff, like, that doesn't make the headlines. That's what I like to say about our organization. The Grammy Awards gets all the headlines. But the really important work that we do that serves every single person in the music community doesn't make the headlines. And not that you want to go bragging or boasting, but I mean, to me, it's really important that I want people to know. So today, if you leave with only one thing, I want you to know that Music Cares exists. And if you know somebody in music, they can be a performer, they can be a stagehand. All they got to do is prove that they've been in the music industry for 5 years. They don't have to be a member of the Recording Academy. If they're in need of help, if I've put many people in rehab, I've paid for many funerals, I've helped people with financial hardship. That's what this is here for. We raise millions of dollars every year and we give it out. Look, we've distributed over $100 million since 1989 to help musicians.
And then tell them about like the doctors and dentists.
Yeah,
They
so
come here.
So that's just starting to kind of come back after COVID. So COVID screwed up a lot of that. So what I used to say a lot was that with Music Cares, we do way too much like emergency care. Unfortunately, a lot of people need it, but we try to do as much preventative care as well. So we've done things with like dental visits and doctor visits and earplugs for musicians and things like that. So, you know, it's there as a resource. If you know, it's the one thing you got to remember is that it's spelled really weird. There's only one C and it's all one word. But if you Google Music Cares, if you know somebody who needs help, if somebody's fighting addiction, if somebody broke their hand and can't play gigs for the next 3 months, if somebody's house burned down, whatever that is, if they're a musician or they're in the music industry for a minimum of 5 years, we're there to help. And so we treat everybody, like it says, with integrity and confidentiality. The only time we'll say somebody's name if they come to us and say, I want to go out and help raise money, use me as an example of somebody who needed help. I can honestly tell you, I've been in rooms where the biggest rock stars, country stars on the planet walk into an AA kind of room. We do things backstage at the Grammys and different music festivals that we call the Safe Harbor Room. People need help because we as musicians, we work in situations where you're tempted every day. People all around you are doing drugs or alcohol, and if you're in recovery, the best thing you have is a friend that can say, come sit down and we'll take care of you. I've been in rooms backstage at the Grammys where the biggest rock stars on the planet walked in and they need help. And that group was there to help me. And it blew me away that somebody that big and powerful is that vulnerable to addiction. So if you take anything else away today, this is the most important thing I think we did, because we save lives through this program. So I guess that's pretty much it. If you're interested in joining, that's the website to join. That's my email if anybody wants it. Happy to give you my phone number. I have PDFs of all of this junk that I can email you if you want to dig deeper. Any other questions or anything? There's probably a ton of stuff I didn't cover, but I'm still a little vacation brain dead. Yes, ma'am.
How hard is it just to actually just work for?
Well, the Recording Academy? Well, it's a really small organization. So I'm the only one in like all of Louisiana. In that 5-state region that I showed you, let me go back to that slide. How do I get there? Why does my mouse keep disconnected? So in our Memphis chapter, there's me in New Orleans and there's one person in Memphis. There's 2 people in Atlanta. There's 2 people in Florida. Now there's about 5 or 6 people in Nashville. There's 2 people in DC. There's 2 people in Philly. There's 3 people in Chicago. There's 3 people in Texas. The home office is in Santa Monica, so they got a boatload there. But that's where we do all the marketing and all the production stuff. So if you go to the Grammy.com website, there's a job posting. So there are jobs posted all the time. A lot of them are much more entry-level jobs. We get a lot of kids. So through our Grammy U program that I talked about, a lot of those go on to be interns, and we hire a lot of interns. So really, internships and getting involved with Grammy U is a great way to get involved. I will say some of our folks who started out in Grammy U are now board members and have worked their way up to being, you know,
The age thing is big.
could be. You're nice and young. But yeah, go to the jobs. It's at the very bottom. If you go to Grammy.com, there's a job board down there and they're posting all the time. A lot of those more entry-level jobs are, you know, a lot of people use them as stepping stones. Not everybody's an old fart like me that's been here 20 years, but you know, it's a great company to work for. I mean, I've been with them a long time and, you know, the main reason I'm still here is because I care about people and our mission is to care about people. And it's really important to me to be an advocate, not only for the big, in fact, I'm more of an advocate for the average independent artist than I am for the big. Mostly, we don't have big giant pop stars in our chapter. We're average Joe and Jills who work our butts off to be professionals. So, any other questions before Anna kicks us out? Yeah, back here. That's just to get help from Music Cares. That's their requirements. You know, if you got clippings that showed you played at a club 5 years ago or something like that, they're going to be as flexible as they can be. Their goal is to help everybody that they can. It's just that as a nonprofit, they're a separate nonprofit from us. We're a nonprofit membership organization. So the Academy is a 501c6. So we're a professional organization, like I said, a trade association. They're a 501c3 charitable organization. So they have IRS guidelines. So they have to follow the bylaws that are written there. So their bylaws call that you have to be active in the industry for 5 years. So if you did a gig 6 years ago, you're good. Yes.
First of all, is there a differentiation for the jazz category? There is contemporary, there's just the traditional jazz category, which is probably smooth contemporary. Is there a more than any jazz?
What I would do is, one, I can email you the descriptions. I didn't show, because they're pages long. It's like a 10-page document, but every single category has descriptions of what fits in that category. No, I hear you. Yeah, I think, so that has changed over the last couple of years. There is a new alternative jazz category, which I call the Robert Glasper category, because Robert Glasper has been incorporating hip hop and R&B and all these other elements into jazz. And that kind of caused a movement. And there's a whole movement of musicians out there and they're amazing. But they were like, we need to find a place for them to really fit because they weren't really in the straight up traditional, you know, not traditional, but you know, what most people would call straight mainstream jazz or whatever. So now there has been and I don't know if it's still in there now. Now that you're saying that, I got to look. There used to be a sort of new age / contemporary instrumental, I think is what you're referring to. I think we changed it to contemporary instrumental, which is kind of like new age and stuff like that. So you had a question?
Yes, so when it comes to the first round of voting, is there any way to reach out to them or to promote to the voting members?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question. So we have official vote solicitation guidelines